this the secret to Matt Bellamy's beautiful tremolo? Is the title of this video. Now, the obvious thing about Matt Bellamy's tremolo picking is his high ability to pick one string really, really quickly and change notes on time. But I think that bit's quite obvious. What gets overlooked is Matthew Bellamy's compositional skills. He's not just picking any old notes here. He's either using some theory-based thing or his ear to pick notes that work really, really well. So we're going to be diving in to that. So if you're a Muse fan, you're going to enjoy this video. So without further ado, let's get zoomed in. Okay, so the first example we're actually going to get a look at is taken from Absolution back in 2003, I believe. And the track is number 9, Blackout, one of Muse's finest ballads. Beautiful string arrangement in there as well. And the intro to Blackout, the chords go as follows. Beautiful, beautiful chord progression there. That in itself is enough to make the tremolo picking melody on the top of it actually stand out. So the chords individually, let's get a look at those. We've got a B flat, then we've got a D minor with an A in the bass, then we have an E flat with a G in the bass, and then we're up to an F augmented, where we've got that beautiful sharpened fifth, which is important because we're going to talk about that when we talk about the tremolo. Then in the second section of the intro, it's B flat again. But this time, he's playing a different inversion of D minor. Instead of putting an A in the bass, it's just a straight D minor chord with the D in the bass. Then he plays a straight E flat chord instead of the E flat with the G in the bass. And then he has an F to F augmented in the second part of the bar. So already we can see, compositionally, there's been some very nice alterations to the chords just to make things sound a little bit different each time. Okay? And then we get to the tremolo part, and the tremolo part goes as follows. 1, 2, 3, 2, 2, 3. Okay, and it does that same thing twice. So let's have a look at his note choice. What's he actually doing? So over the B flat chord, we've got this. So he's actually playing the root note, which of course is B flat. Then he's going up to the third of B flat. So very strong chord tones. Important to notice that there. Then when it goes to the D minor, he goes to A, and he goes to D. So A is the fifth of D minor, and then D is the root of D minor. So again, quite strong chord tones. And it's also important to notice that in the melody, the third fret, the B flat, is only one semitone away from the A on the second fret for the second part. So that's been kind of purposefully done. Then we get to the E flat chord, and we've got a G and an E flat. So this is kind of interesting because the first time round it's E flat with a G in the bass. Well, if the G's in the bass, well, again, we've got a G, which is a note from the chord. And then we've got the E flat itself, which can sort of also be classed as the root as well as the G, if you catch my drift. So if the G's in the bass of the chord, the G would be the root. But if the E flat's in the bass of the chord, then the E flat is the root note. So, yeah, I'll leave that with you, but just something to notice. And then when we get to the F augmented chord, he plays A, which is the third of F augmented, the major third. Okay. And then he goes up to the C sharp, which is the sharpened fifth, which is the characteristic note of the F augmented chord. So you've got very specific notes being used here, because it would have been easy just to play anything within the scale, but instead he's picked chord tones which really come out when he tremolo picks them. I mean, they'd come out even as single notes, and that's kind of the beauty of it, really. Next example is Newborn, which of course is the first track of Origin of Symmetry. Just a quick note on that album, I did a first listen of Origin of Symmetry, the new version. It also may interest you to know that new version has actually been updated again. I'm pretty sure they've remixed it. In fact, I know for a fact they've changed one of the tracks. Anyway, check out that video. I'll link it up above. So, Newborn is the next example. Let's have a look at which chords are actually being outlined in this track. So, the chords, the ones that you hear on the piano, are the same ones at the start of the song, are the same ones that are used during the solo. So, the chords outlined during the guitar solo are as follows. We've got an E minor, then we have a B with an E in the bass, and then that goes round a few more times. And then we get to a C chord, and then we get to a G with a B in the bass, and it finishes up with a B with a D sharp in the bass. So some beautiful harmony, which I suspect was written on a piano. Now take note of the notes that are played on the G, B and high E. So basically just ignore the bass notes on the low E string. And just look at these triads for a second. Okay? Remember those triads, because we're going to look a bit deeper into that after we've analysed the bass line. So let's look at how the bass line sits underneath those chords and provides a good foundation. So our bass line goes as follows. And this is for the whole solo. Okay? Lovely bass line. What's going on there? Well, over the E minor chord, he's playing the root, the octave, and then the 4 and the 5. So very, very stable there. And that goes around, I think, 9 times in total before we get to the C chord, which goes root, octave. So seeing a bit of a pattern already with roots and octaves, keeping it stable. But then we have this sharp 4th, which, if you know your modes, the sharp 4 is characteristic of the Lydian mode. So it's got that Lydian kind of sound for a second. And then there's a G with a B in the bass, and underneath that, we've basically got notes from G with a B in the bass. Okay, we've got the 3rd, and then the octave of the 3rd, and then we've got the major 7 and the root. Looking at it from the perspective of G major, of course. And then with the B with the D sharp in the bass, if we're looking at it from the perspective of the B chord, we've got the 3rd, the octave of the 3rd, and then the flat 7, which makes it dominant to some extent, and then the root. Okay, sort of functions as a dominant chord, the bass line being the way it is, sort of, because it's got the flat 7 in there. Okay. Right, on to the guitar solo. So the guitar solo goes a little something like this. Something like that, okay? Now think back to those triads I told you to think about a moment ago when we were looking at the chords that are outlined. Each one of these tremolo lines can be taken from its respective triad. And I mean directly. He's using the strongest notes of the triad, all the notes of the triad, being the strongest kind of notes of any chord, really, and using them for this solo. So over that chord, that E minor chord, well, he's doing the E minor triad. Now he's doing it all on one string. You know, instead of going like this, you know, because your alternate picking technique has to be really on point to be able to go across strings in that way. And so he's just doing it on one string. And, you know, there's nothing wrong with doing it on one string. That's how Matt Bellamy approaches his guitar playing. That's how a lot of his solos go. He just picks really, really, really quickly on one string. But, you know, he's playing the B, which is the 5th of E minor, the G, which is the minor 3rd of E minor, and then the root. And then for the B with an E in the bass, he's playing the root note, and then he's going down to the 5th, the F sharp, and then the 3rd, the C sharp, and then back up again. Those 2 bars go around a few times, and then he eventually gets to the C chord. So remember, your C triad would be this. All right. And he plays the C, which is the root note, the G, which is the 5th, the E, which is the 3rd, and then back up. And then for the G with the B in the bass, it'd be this triad here. But he plays the B, which is the 3rd, the root, which is the G, which is the root, and then down to the 5th, which is the note D. And then for that last chord, B with the D sharp and the bass, he plays the D sharp first of all, which would be the 3rd, and then he plays the F sharp, which would be the 5th, and then up to the root. And then obviously all of that kind of goes round 2 times. But as you can see, very kind of intentional note choices because he's using those triads. Our final example is Knights of Cydonia, which is, of course, the final track on Black Holes and Revelations. So let's just play the chords as they are in the track. Okay, we've got an E minor chord, a D with an F sharp in the bass, and then we've got a G5, and then an A, and then a B. And on the recording, I can't really hear the high E string on any of those chords. They don't sound quite right to me with the high E string involved. But feel free to correct me. And then we get, of course, to the tremolo part, and in the tremolo part, he plays this now famous Muse line. Okay, so in terms of what he's actually doing with these notes, well, over the E minor chord, he's playing the root note, and then he does a passing note from the harmonic minor scale, which will be the sharp 7th of E harmonic minor, which is D sharp, and then back up to the root, and then his pinky lands on the F sharp, which is the root of a D with an F sharp in the bass, and then he drops down a tone to E. 2 more passing notes, E, F sharp, and then G. He lands on the root note again when he gets to the G chord. And then when he hits the A chord, he actually ends up on the 12th on the A, but there's a descending harmonic minor run. And where he ends up is again on that sharp 7, which is what makes it sound harmonic minor. And then you're only 1 semitone away from the root note for when the sequence repeats again, and you're also on the 3rd of B major. So yeah, there it is. So I hope that was helpful to kind of dive into the compositional side of what Matt Bellamy does when he tremolo picks on a few of those songs. This is a very different kind of video for me. So yeah, we'll see what kind of response it gets. But thanks for watching either way. As usual, you can get notation and other bits and bobs over on Patreon. And if you are after private lessons, I'll put a link in the description for that as well. So see you guys again soon. Take it easy. Bye.